In this episode, we are looking at the web browser, which is one of the most used and most exposed tools on almost every computer. People use it for work, shopping, banking, school, entertainment, cloud apps, file sharing, and everyday research, so a huge part of daily computer activity passes through the browser without much thought. That is exactly why it matters so much in security. The browser sits at the point where the user meets outside content, and that outside content is not always safe, honest, or well-designed. For beginners, this topic is important because many security problems do not start with someone breaking into a system in some dramatic way. They start with a user opening the browser, visiting the wrong page, approving the wrong prompt, installing the wrong extension, or downloading something that looked harmless for a few seconds. Browser hardening means making those common mistakes less likely and making the browser itself a safer place to work. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at CyberAuthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A browser is exposed because it connects users to so many different kinds of content in such a short amount of time. A person may open a search engine, check webmail, use online documents, download a form, log into a bank, stream video, and click a social media link all within 1 hour. Each of those actions brings the browser into contact with websites, scripts, files, forms, ads, trackers, and login pages from many different sources. Some of those sources are trustworthy, and some are not. The browser does not know the user's full intention. It follows the instructions built into the page, the settings chosen by the user, and the protections built into the software. That means the browser often becomes the first place where unsafe content meets the user. For a beginner, this is the key idea to remember. Browsers are not dangerous because browsing is bad. Browsers are exposed because they are constantly handling outside content, and outside content is one of the most common paths to trouble. One of the simplest and most useful browser hardening habits is update discipline. A browser should stay current because it is a major target for attackers and a major path for unsafe content. When a browser is outdated, it may still look and feel normal to the user, but it can contain weaknesses that are already known and already being used by people who want an easy way in. That matters because browsers are not quiet little tools that only open text. They process active content, handle logins, manage files, run web apps, and connect to many services, so weakness in the browser can have a larger effect than beginners first expect. A technician should explain browser updates in plain language. The browser should be treated like important software, not like a minor accessory. If the browser is used every day and connected to the outside world all day long, then keeping it updated is basic protection, not optional cleanup. Update discipline also means more than clicking update once in a while and then forgetting about it. Some users delay restarts, leave old browser windows open for days, or ignore the signs that an update is waiting to be applied fully. That can leave the browser in a half-protected state longer than the user realizes. A beginner should understand that updates often need to finish properly before the protection really improves. If the browser says it needs a restart or is still pending an update, that is not just a small annoyance. It is part of completing the security fix. This is especially important in environments where users depend heavily on web apps and may not want to interrupt their work. A technician should help users understand that a short interruption for a browser update is much better than a longer interruption caused by malicious content, unsafe behavior, or a browser that was left behind while the rest of the system moved forward. Downloads are another major browser risk because they turn web activity into something stored on the computer. The browser is often the tool that brings files from the internet onto the device, and that means it plays a direct role in whether unsafe content reaches the system. Beginners sometimes think the dangerous part is only the website itself, but the more serious risk may start after the file arrives. A file may look like a normal document, update, installer, or image, yet still be the wrong thing to trust. Browser hardening includes being careful about where downloads come from, whether they were expected, and whether the user really needs them at all. A technician should teach a simple habit here. Do not download just because something is offered. Download because there is a clear reason, from a source you meant to use, and in a situation that makes sense. That small pause can prevent a great deal of avoidable trouble. Trusted content is closely tied to download behavior because the browser constantly asks the user to make trust decisions. A page may offer a file, suggest a browser update, ask to run something, or claim that a tool is needed before the content can be viewed. Many unsafe actions begin when the user accepts that message as normal and moves too quickly. The problem is not always that the page looks obviously fake. Sometimes it looks almost right, and almost right is enough when a person is rushed. A beginner should learn that trusted content means more than content that looks familiar. It means content from a source the user intentionally chose, in a context that makes sense, without pressure, strange prompts, or unexpected demands. If a random site suddenly says the browser needs an urgent update, that should feel suspicious. Real browser updates should come through the browser's normal update process, not from a random page asking the user to fix something right now. The browser also handles a huge amount of everyday content that is not a download, but still deserves caution. This includes pop-up windows, login prompts, media players, embedded documents, redirect pages, and forms asking for personal details. Any of these can become a problem if the user trusts them too quickly. A common beginner mistake is thinking danger only begins when a file is saved to the device. In reality, a misleading page, a fake login screen, or a dishonest form can be harmful long before a file is ever downloaded. That is why browser hardening includes learning to slow down around content that demands action. If the page creates fear, urgency, or confusion, that is a warning sign. Safe browsing is often less about memorizing every thread and more about learning the feel of suspicious content. The browser will always be full of requests, prompts, and offers. Hardening means not treating all of them as equally trustworthy just because they appear in a familiar window. Extensions are another important part of browser hardening because they can change what the browser does, what it can see, and what it can access. An extension may add useful features, block ads, save notes, help with passwords, or improve productivity in other ways. That sounds helpful, and often it is. The problem is that an extension also becomes part of the browser environment, which means it may gain access to pages, typing, browsing history, downloads, or other activity, depending on its design and permissions. For beginners, the simplest way to think about an extension is this. It is not just a decoration. It is a piece of added browser power. If the extension is safe and needed, that may be fine. If it is poorly made, unnecessary, or dishonest, it can weaken the browser instead of helping it. Extension control matters because many users install them casually, forget they are there, and never stop to think about how much they may be allowed to do. A safer browser usually has fewer extensions, not more. That does not mean extensions are bad by default. It means each added extension increases complexity and creates another thing the user has to trust. Beginners often install an extension because it promises something convenient, then leave it in place forever even after they stop using it. Over time, the browser fills up with little tools that may still have access to activity even when they no longer provide much value. A technician should encourage a simple habit. Keep only the extensions that are clearly needed, review them from time to time, and remove anything no longer used or no longer trusted. This is beginner-friendly because it does not require deep technical knowledge. It only requires a basic question. Why is this extension here, and do I still need it? If the answer is unclear, that is often a good reason to remove it. A cleaner browser is usually easier to trust and easier to protect. Certificate awareness is another key browser skill, and this topic becomes easier when you understand the main purpose of a certificate. A certificate helps the browser check that it is connecting to the right site in a trusted way and that the connection is being protected as expected. Beginners do not need to study the math behind it to benefit from the concept. What matters is that the browser is trying to confirm identity and secure the connection before the user starts sending passwords, payment details, or private information. When that process works properly, the user gains more confidence that the site is what it claims to be and that the connection is not casually exposed. Certificate awareness matters because many users click through warnings without understanding what the browser is trying to tell them. A technician should explain that those warnings are not random noise. They are signals that the browser is unsure whether the connection is being handled safely. This is why certificate warnings should not be ignored casually. If the browser says a connection is not trusted, a site identity does not match, or something is wrong with the security of the page, that should make the user stop rather than continue automatically. A beginner does not need to become a certificate expert to use good judgment here. It is enough to understand that a serious warning about the site's identity or secure connection is not the same thing as a normal design issue on a page. It means the browser has a reason to doubt the safety or authenticity of what is in front of the user. Sometimes there is a harmless explanation, but sometimes there is not. The safe habit is to pause, check whether the address is really the one intended, avoid entering sensitive information, and seek help if needed. The browser is doing part of the safety work already. Hardening means respecting those warnings instead of training yourself to click past them. Privacy settings matter because the browser does not only protect against direct attack. It also manages how much information the user gives away during ordinary browsing. Websites often want access to location, notifications, camera, microphone, saved login behavior, tracking data, and browsing patterns. Some of that access is useful in the right moment, but too much broad permission can create unnecessary exposure. For a beginner, privacy settings should be understood as controls over what the browser shares, remembers, and allows. They matter because websites and services often ask for more than they truly need, and users often click allow just to make the prompt disappear. Over time, that can leave the browser more open, more noisy, and more revealing than the user intended. Hardening the browser includes checking those permissions and deciding whether the browser is giving too much information, too many alerts, or too much access to sites that no longer need it. A good example is notifications. Many sites ask to send notifications even when there is no strong reason for that privilege. Users may approve the request quickly, then later wonder why strange messages, ads, or distracting pop-ups keep appearing in the browser. The same thing can happen with location, camera, and microphone permissions. A site may have needed access once, but that does not mean it should keep that access forever. A technician should show beginners that privacy settings are not just about secrecy in a dramatic sense. They are also about reducing unnecessary exposure and reducing browser clutter that can train users to ignore prompts. When too many sites have too many permissions, the browser becomes harder to read and easier to misuse. A simpler, more controlled browser is usually safer because the user can better see what is normal and what is out of place instead of trying to sort through a constant stream of access requests. Browser hardening works best when these habits come together in daily use instead of being treated as separate ideas. A user who keeps the browser updated, downloads only from trusted sources, stays cautious around unexpected prompts, limits extensions, respects certificate warnings, and reviews privacy settings regularly is far less likely to drift into common browser problems. None of those habits is complicated on its own. The challenge is that the browser is such a familiar tool that people stop treating it with care. They click fast, open many tabs, save time where they can, and assume the browser will always sort everything out for them. It helps to remind beginners that the browser is not just a window. It is a point of contact with outside content all day long. Because it sits in that position, it deserves the same care people would give to other major parts of a secure system rather than being treated like a harmless accessory. Technicians can make a big difference here by teaching browser safety in plain language instead of turning it into a long list of technical warnings. A beginner does not need a speech full of advanced terms to improve. What helps most is a clear message. Keep the browser current, be careful with downloads, do not trust every prompt, install fewer extensions, pay attention to security warnings, and review what sites are allowed to do. Those habits fit real life because they match the moments where users actually make decisions. A user is not usually choosing between two huge security systems. The user is deciding whether to click, allow, install, save, continue, or ignore a warning. Browser hardening is about making those everyday decisions safer. When technicians explain that clearly, they help users protect not only the browser itself, but also the accounts, files, and systems the browser touches every day. As we close, the main lesson is that browsers remain one of the most exposed parts of daily computer use because they handle so much outside content so quickly. They connect users to websites, files, forms, logins, web apps, and endless prompts for trust. which means small mistakes in the browser can lead to much larger problems on the system. Hardening the browser means staying disciplined about updates, treating downloads carefully, trusting content only when the source and situation makes sense, controlling extensions so the browser is not overloaded with extra risk, paying attention to certificate warnings, and using privacy settings to limit unnecessary access and exposure. For beginners, that is the big picture to keep. A safer browser does not come from one magic button. It comes from better habits around the tool people use all day long. When those habits improve, the browser becomes a much stronger part of the user's daily workflow instead of one of the easiest places for trouble to begin.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.